Hey guys, today I will be talking about how I was able to go to Ecuador through Temple University. If you're interested in that, what I was even doing abroad for a few weeks and not an entire semester, just keep watching and I will explain all of it. So in my travel Ecuador vlogs, I talked a lot about LASS, which stands for Latin American Study Semester. LASS, which is also what I will be referring to this entire video, is the Temple program that allowed me to travel abroad to Ecuador. It is also an entire semester of Spanish classes. The program is 17 credits, so an entire semester you're with the same 20 people Monday through Friday, probably even the weekends, and everything's in Spanish. You email your professors in Spanish. You can only talk to your professors in Spanish. You're supposed to talk to each other solely in Spanish while you're abroad, while you're in class, while you're in school. And that seems super scary, especially if you're a beginner wanting to do a program like this. But trust me, I was a beginner. I barely knew how to construct a proper sentence, let alone speak in a conversation level. And you know, at the end of the semester, I did both of that. Now, there are 4 classes. There is your grammar, Spanish, 2098. So there are 3 groups, and they kind of name these 3 groups as like beginner, intermediate, advanced. But these grammar classes are 3 hours long, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that seems like a lot, but those are your only Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes. For me, it was 9 a.m. to 11:50. And the thing with this class is that, yes, it's 3 hours long, but you have 3 different professors, so it kind of feels like it's going by super fast. Plus, you don't have to walk around Anderson or to another building. My class had 8 people, Mitad del Mundo, I think they had like 6 people in their class. After each hour, you have a new professor and they'll be teaching you something else. So it kind of switches things up. Tuesday, Thursdays, I took Latin America through film and a sociology course that also was kind of like a history class. With the film class, we watched a lot of Spanish movies. Don't worry, there are English subtitles for you to understand. And also in Tuesday, Thursday classes, there is a LASS seminar class. That's a couple hours. Towards the end of the semester, you do presentations for that class. That's the class where you would watch the full-length movies for the film class. That is also the class where you would talk about pre-departure, and then after the trip, the post-trip, you would debrief and talk about what happened, how you felt, your family, and all of that. So with LASS, it was required that we did service learning, community service in Philly, and while abroad for those 3 weeks. While we were in Philly, they gave us 2 options that previous LASS students have done, and for the entire semester 20 hours are required, and your service learning in Ecuador or wherever country you're in does not count towards those 20 hours. One of the 2 options that were suggested, and the one that I did, was called Mighty Writers. It's this after-school program in the Italian market where your shift once a week can be 2.5 hours, or if you want, you can stay longer and get those hours in faster. We mostly serve the Latino community. A lot of the children in this after-school program, their parents may not speak English very well. The kids are crazy, but they're also wonderful. One of the girls that stood out for me during my experience at Mighty Writers, she's in middle school, and she was talking about her future plans, and I was just so amazed and so in awe by her, because she's like, I want to go to Harvard for law school. I want to become an immigration lawyer and help immigrants trying to come to America. And when the whole thing with the school shooting in Parkland High School in Florida occurred, we had a little very deep discussion about gun violence and gun control and what it is we should be doing to, you know, stop the amount of school shootings in America. And a lot of these kids are in middle school, but they are just so smart. And I can go on and on about this, but I'm trying to get through this last program for you. Service learning in Ecuador, on the other hand, apparently they've never done service learning while abroad, and this is our first time not only in Ecuador, but also doing service learning as part of the program abroad. Because we were only there for 3 weeks, we were split up into 2 groups, and every other day, Monday through Thursday, we would go to the said location. There were 2 options, one working with younger kids at this after school program, another working at a orphanage. I chose a place called Entrega, which was an after-school program with, I think, elementary school children. I chose that because it was closer to my house, and the children that we served were low-income children, and what we did there was keep them company. We played with them. Sometimes they would need help with homework, so I helped with that, which was an experience for me as a person in the beginners group in my Spanish grammar class. Never would I thought I would be, 1, in Ecuador, 2, helping a kid with his English homework. And the thing that got me was the fact that he had this page of comics to read. His homework was to summarize that in English. But the thing was, he knew very little English, or maybe no English at all. So I was reading in English, explaining it in Spanish. That was a very rewarding experience for me. Unfortunately, that was not the top thing that we did while we were there. It was a lot of playing with the children. But that was just my experience. A whole nother group worked at a different site, and their experience was completely different. One of the complaints surrounding service learning in another country, especially working with younger kids and people at an orphanage, is that we were only there because we had to be. And it's really difficult working with children for a short amount of time to see our faces 4 or 5 days, and then all of a sudden we're gone. And I can imagine it's especially harder for those in an orphanage where they're used to people coming and going and leaving them. So how much did this cost? Because we were still at Temple doing normal classes with a full amount of credits, we did have to pay normal tuition, and because we were going to Ecuador for 3 weeks, we had to pay an additional $1,000 for class trips, for your host family, them feeding you food, for food while you're on these class trips. And honestly, I feel like $1,000 is so good for what you get while you're there. Your host family feeds you, you have your own room, your host family does your laundry every week. But tuition itself is super expensive, and $1,000 extra is even more expensive, $1,000 more expensive. But there are scholarships to help pay for that. I know through LASS, they sent out a link to apply to the John Means Study Abroad Scholarship. And I know me and I know some other people in my class applied to that. I, for one, got $1,100 for that. That's $100 more than what was needed for the Ecuador part of the LASS program. While you're in Ecuador, you'll realize how cheap Ecuador is. But let me tell you from experience, it all adds up. You know, they have Uber in Ecuador, and their taxis are pretty cheap. When you go to a panaderia, you get like 10 things for like $2. If you live a little bit further away from the school like I did, don't keep taking those Ubers and those taxis. I suggest taking the public transportation, the bus, which I did a few times, because it's 25 cents one way. And girl, you'll be saving so much more money, because by the end of the trip, I pretty much had nothing. And also, in Ecuador, their currency is the US dollar. And because it's cheap, I suggest bringing lots of dollar bills, 5s, 10s. If you have coins, and I suggest to bring that change with you. My typical schedule in Ecuador. So in Ecuador, we have classes Monday through Friday. Throughout the week, sometimes you're going on a class field trip, so you don't really have class that day, you're just on this trip. Regular class time is from 8 in the morning to 12, so after classes are over, you have the options which they suggest for you to go back home, have lunch with your host family. And in Ecuador, in South America, lunch is very important, more important than dinner is. If you and your friends have something planned after lunch, like going up a mountain in El Teleferico like I did, just text your mom, let her know what is up, because you don't want to worry them like I have worried my mother, because I did not know how to work my WhatsApp app. If you have service learning that day, you usually still have classes, then you go to lunch, and then by that time lunch is over, you would go to service learning. And if you don't have service learning, you have the option to go to the park, explore. The nightlife is pretty good, especially because you're in a city, so there's lots of bars. There's this place called Plaza Foch, which is also known as Gringolandia, aka where all like the tourists go to drink. And the drinking age is 18, so if you're in college, we're legally allowed to drink in Ecuador. So we did just that, but 100% make sure you go with other people. So most weekends were free, and especially with the nor'easter that happened during the time that we had to leave, you know, classes got pushed back. People didn't arrive on time, and so we had an additional weekend free. We originally were only supposed to have 1 weekend free, but then we had 2 weekends free, which brings me to where to go. If your last program goes to Ecuador, then I suggest Los Baños. I also suggest the Amazon, which the town and the hostel that we stayed in was in Tena. And from there we took a bus in Tena that drove us about 20 minutes, I think, to Mishawaji. And that's where you can find the monkey beach. That's where you can find the little boats that will take you to make chocolate or to the Quechua village. Or if you want, you can also just swim in the river there. Also around Tena, we went to a waterfall. I did not vlog that. I didn't want to drop my camera in the water. We swam in a waterfall, and that's something you can do in the Amazon. Some places other people went were Cotopaxi, which is a volcano, and to the beach. Why I decided to do this. So when I first arrived to Temple, I took Spanish 1001, the basic Spanish. In the Spanish department, they tell you a lot about LASS because it's very Spanish intensive. It's definitely something that I've thought about since Spanish 1001. They suggest that you have taken Spanish 1001, 1002 already before trying to apply to LASS, just so you have like a basis, because you will just be speaking Spanish the whole time, especially like the first day. So I was debating this program a lot, especially in the fall semester when I had already applied for LASS, but was still thinking, should I do this? Should I drop it? Just because, you know, courses and everything. I'm not a Spanish major, not sure if I want a minor. It was my last required semester of taking a language, which is a requirement for, I think, global studies. The CLA requirement is 2 semesters of a language, but don't quote me on that. Plus, I decided to do this because I wanted to travel. And yeah, I probably could have just studied abroad in another country for an entire semester, which I will be doing next spring anyway. But I'm 100% glad I did this program. I don't regret it at all, one bit. But I mean, if I want to graduate in 4 years, I probably have like less options for that, because this is a lot of the electives for my major. I fell in love with the Spanish language and the culture and Ecuador in general, and everything, just everything about learning a language I fell in love with. When it was required for me to take Spanish 1001, 1002, 1003, I didn't feel the same pull and the drive to learn another language. And maybe that's because I wasn't completely immersed in Spanish, and many of the things about it being a requirement was just forced on you. So when it was my decision to do this program, I took all the responsibility with, okay, I decided that I'm going to do this, which means I have to decide that I'm going to learn this. I want to travel more and experience more, especially since this trip to Ecuador was without my parents, and I was there for 3 weeks, which is the longest time I've ever been out of the country in a single trip. I felt so independent and in my element almost, being this world traveler, something and someone I've always imagined myself to be. Learn a language, everyone, do it. It'll change like you in general, and I think that's crazy. You dream in Spanish too? Like, it's literally insane. All in all, it's just a really great feeling to physically feel yourself improving, and even more so when the people around you who have been there since the beginning, you know, watching you learn, teaching you more, seeing you grow, when they also recognize that you have improved immensely, it's such an amazing feeling and a sense of accomplishment that you're just so proud of yourself at the end. And it's even more so noticeable when you're a beginner like I was. Yes, my language skills aren't perfect, but I notice the difference and I notice how much I improved. So thank you for watching. If you haven't caught up with my Ecuador vlogs, hashtag Andrea in Ecuador, watch the Ecuador vlogs from the day I arrived when I lost my luggage to almost the end when I got a tattoo. Side note, I am very upset that I lost the footage from my last day in Ecuador because my mom said some nice things that I wanted to remember. But I hope my travel vlogs made you want to just go explore the world, go learn a new language. And that is what I'm going to leave you with here. Such a long video, I know. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, again, please leave them down below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.